So first of all, thanks a lot for the fantastic speech.
Oh, thank you. Sorry,
and all the
too
points
long.
I think that's fine. We really had quite a lot to cover. So we have, I think, 15 minutes for this chat. I have some questions. I'm sure you guys have burning questions after Helen's talk. Just maybe for us to get a sense, we were wondering, like, if we say who is more policy legal in the audience, who is more technical, we're going to move back and forth between more technical questions and policy questions. So who comes from a policy or legal background? Can you raise your hand? Okay. Who comes from a technical background?
Even split.
Yeah, it looks like it. So we'll try to split the question evenly between technical and legal. So maybe the first one, let me start. So I'm technical, let me start with a legal one. As you mentioned, right, it was decided at the time that GDPR enforcement would be basically better carried out by a network of independent national authorities and a one-stop shop mechanism. This is something that has been criticized at the time, something that has been criticized in the Draghi report, including yesterday. Other models in different fields of law have been used. For example, in competition, was like a European agency for any case that would involve companies operating in several EU countries, and then national authorities for smaller national companies. So, with your experience, what do you think of the current model? Does it work? Is there a better model that would help enforcement?
Very interesting question, and it's a big question about which I've thought very often. I'm not sure, based on what I outlined earlier, that it's all to do with the model, but I'll come back to the model. In some ways, it's about how the model is operationalized. It's how the National Data Protection Authorities and the EDPB put it together in practice. And that could certainly have been better and improved, but there was lots of jostling going on. And as I say, a lot of disparate authorities, different resourcing levels and capabilities of authorities coming together. The model that we have, I do understand the proximity to complainants is important, but I suppose that goes back as well to that issue of the pathways in the GDPR all being constructed around individual complainants and their fundamental rights, which distinguishes it from competition law. In those circumstances, I do think you can't really compare the competition regime, and I think it'd be very hard to know where to draw the line in terms of what cases the EU Commission would handle. And equally, while there is the concept of complainant under EU competition law in the cases dealt with by the EU Commission, it's not at all the same concept of data subject that we have under the GDPR. So there's no easy answer to this. There was, of course, debate at the time that the GDPR was implemented about the EU Commission being a centralised enforcer for cross-border cases, and that was rejected by the member states on the basis the EU Commission wouldn't be sufficiently independent. There was also talk about setting up a new centralised institution, and of course it was an economic and political compromise to leave it under this form of country of origin one-stop shop. The model, I think, that could work better and could have worked better is the original one-stop shop model proposed by the EU Commission in 2012, where the lead authority would have more authority to conclude an investigation, still subject to checks and balances and, of course, review by the courts, but it would have much more scope to start and see through an investigation rather than this consultation with 47 different data protection authorities on every single cross-border case. So even repeat type complaints about platforms. We would receive a lot of complaints from individuals complaining that to shut down or delete their account, a copy of their passport was now being required. They didn't need a copy of their ID to set it up. That would be a repeat type. All of those had to go through the landmass of the one-stop shop in every case, and it's simply completely inefficient and counterproductive actually to the best protection and the speedy protection of rights. So I think, long story short, that original EU Commission model where you allow scope to the lead authority to be the lead would work better.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to a technical question. As you mentioned, right, the recent SRB judgment basically clarifies that, you know, pseudonymous data basically isn't necessarily anonymous data, and it depends on the means reasonably likely to be used, you know, repeating basically recital 26. I'm sure the lawyers love it and are all over the SRB case. To be honest, as a technical person, it still doesn't really tell me, like, you know, what is, you know, how much anonymization is enough anonymization. Is there anything that you would see that, like, you know, further clarifications or guidance you would like to see from authorities or from the court? Do we need to wait for a case that clearly shows, okay, this isn't enough at least? Like, I think technically we have a sense of, okay, this is, you know, surely this is anonymous. Where exactly the bar isn't clear. Do we need to wait for a case where the courts are going to be, well, this is clearly not enough, this is clearly not anonymous enough? Like, how do we move forward?
Yeah, I do think it would be very useful if we got a reference case to the CJU that was complete in terms of the facts, so that when the CJU rules, it isn't stopping short and saying, and so it's for the National Referring Court now to establish the facts and where the line is. Because, of course, we've had reference cases like the IAB Europe on similar questions that went back to the Market Court in Belgium. But I think there isn't the same confidence that that is giving us pan-European guidance on where the line is. So I do think the ideal and optimal would be a very complete set of facts from a national court referred over to the CJU. I don't mean to be trite, and of course it doesn't in a technical sense answer the question, but I think inevitably what the CJU and authorities are going to say is that where the line is the line where effectively re-identification cannot occur. And that won't be in the same place every time. It isn't just a technical question, as we saw from the judgment. It depends on the context. It depends on the nature and risks of the data being processed and all of those different factors. So I think we will get more guidance as there are more cases. And it's not ideal at the moment, but it's also an opportunity, and an opportunity for the kinds of people in an audience like this to help demonstrate where those reasonable lines are.
Sounds good. Thank you. Let's open the floor to questions. I think we have a few more minutes. Questions, please. No comments. Anyone? I think there should be people walking the room with mics. So just raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. So we have a question. Oh, we have many. So there's one at the back there. So please keep the question short.
Hello there. Thank you very much for a fascinating talk. You made comments around the difficulties, for instance, with 47 different data protection authorities, or even inconsistencies in GDPR. As we know, in Ireland, for example, in relation to the AI Act, we're going to have several national competent authorities in a decentralised system. That's just in one country. What do you think are the challenges that are going to be faced in the actual enforcement and effective enforcement of the AI Act based on your experiences of trying to do it with GDPR when there was one single national competent authority, as I understand?
Yeah, I think the challenges are going to be significant. As you said, there isn't a one-stop shop under the AI Act, and there's going to be territorial jurisdiction based on the location of deployers and providers. Some of the challenges for regulators are, of course, going to be having a critical mass of expertise, because some of them will only encounter a case, in the case of market surveillance authorities, perhaps once a year. If, for example, they're responsible for regulating the AI in the safety component of a product, issues may arise very, very infrequently. And so you've got to do the heavy lift of understanding the procedural route to deal with the case, but it's not something you're doing every single day. Coordination is going to be a huge issue. In Ireland, we will have a central coordination authority. It's not clear, however, that it in and of itself will be a regulator, and yet it will be the representative on the European board. So information flows, knowledge and expertise, all of that is going to be a challenge. But one of the reasons why I emphasised today that proper evaluation of the GDPR is urgent, and designing a system as best we can that better measures impacts, that is urgent because of now the fact that GDPR and personal data issues are foundational to other areas of regulation, and it's going to create chaos if we don't have the foundation stable upon which those other challenging aspects are built.
Thank you. Questions, maybe a technical one to balance things out. Technical question, go for it. Yeah, right there, please.
Okay, so mine wasn't necessarily a technical question, but I think it can also play a part into lean into the technical. You were talking about how data protection law, particularly the GDPR, is individual focused. Do you think that there's room for maybe looking to reform data protection law to also maybe focus at a group or societal level? And would maybe, from your past experience, would that help regulators to be able to regulate effectively when complaints are no longer just about the individual, but maybe we're focusing on certain types of groups or certain types of collectives? Thank you.
Yeah, I do. If I was reforming the GDPR, that's exactly an area that I would look at, not just at the issue that I mentioned of 34 complainants complaining about the same set of processing operations of one platform, but actually an entire sector. So throughout my time at the Data Protection Authority, international data transfers, in particular to the USA, and ad tech, issues to do with ad tech, dominated. But I was obliged to investigate those issues by reference to individual complaints in respect of one company, when in fact the issues are common across multiple platforms and companies, and actually part of an ecosystem with a lot of operators, and the solutions will only come by tackling them at that broader systemic level. And yet the GDPR doesn't have pathways to allow for that. So yes, I do think that is an area that would improve protection of individuals and the broader public.
Thank you. We're at 10:55. Do we have time for one more? I'm looking at Rob. I don't know where he's in the room. Do we have time for one more question? Yeah, okay, so we have time for one more technical. Okay, please go ahead.
How do you see the GDPR's right to explanation applied to complex machine learning models under the EU AI Act, especially when decisions are not easily interpretable?
Did you ask me about the right to not be subject to automatic? Sorry, I missed just the very start of your question.
To explanation, the right.
The right to an explanation. A lot has been written about these issues, and it really reminds me of when we talked a lot about blockchain, and that's an area of technology that doesn't fit neatly into the GDPR in terms of right to deletion and right to access to data and defining who the data controller is. I think it's difficult in the 15 seconds remaining to give you an answer to that question, but I think a general sense of what the purpose of the regulation is and what the intended purpose of the algorithm is really the best I can say at this stage.
Perfect. Thank you. So thanks a lot, everyone. Please join me in thanking Helen again for a fantastic talk and answer to questions.